Hello everyone and welcome. I'm John and today I'm going to be repotting this beautiful ficus lyrata bambino. This is my birthday bambino that I got on my birthday as a gift 2 years ago, and it has grown up really well. It's looking like a proper tree now. I got all 3 of these trunks in here wrapped up nice and tight, but it's time to repot it for the year, and so I wanted to do a video to talk about when is the best time to repot your houseplants. Now, like anything in life, people have all kinds of different opinions about this, but there's really like 2 main strategies that I've come across as to timing your repots, and I've tried them both and I have some thoughts to share with you from my experience. So I'll walk you through all of that today so that you can make the decision that's right for you. So first, let's define a repot. So what I mean by that, I mean a full repot. I'm gonna get this thing out of here. I'm gonna remove as much of this soil as possible and I'm gonna put it in a pot with all new potting mix. That's what I mean by a repot. You could also do some so-called slip potting methods where you pull this out and just stick it into a bigger pot and fill in around it. But I would highly recommend that if you're not going to fully change out the growing medium, you at least get in there, massage the root ball, loosen things up a little bit before you put them into the new pot, because you don't want to take a really tight tangled mess of roots and just stick them in a new pot. It'll take longer for those roots to grow into that new soil than it would if you actually got in there and roughed them up a little bit. So you'll see when I repot this thing later, I'm not really gentle with roots at all, but I always make sure my plants are healthy enough to handle this before I go ahead and repot them. Okay, so let's go over those 2 main theories that I was referencing earlier. First, we have to understand that repotting is very stressful for plants, and more or less so depending on how you're doing it. So you definitely want to do this at a time of year when the plant has plenty of energy. So winter is a terrible time to repot any sort of houseplant. You want to wait until it's growing so that you know it has the strength and energy reserves it needs to survive this. So some people would tell you you should wait until summertime, more or less, to do your repotting, because that is when these houseplants have the most energy they're going to have all year. They're building energy more, getting stronger, stronger, and stronger all the way through spring. Days are getting longer, warmer, conditions are getting better for them, and they're at their peak vigor for the year right around the summertime. So that's an excellent time to repot because the plant will have plenty of energy to bounce back right away. Now, the other main theory or strategy people would use is to repot in the springtime, either when you notice new growth or just before things start growing again. And that can be really good because it gives the plant that fresh start, that new soil that it's gonna take it through that whole year, that whole growing season. But since the plant just came out of winter, that period of the lowest energy of the year, and now all of a sudden things are getting better, and then bam, it's got to handle a repot and deal with that stress. Depending on the timing of that, that could be potentially harmful to the plant. So based on those 2 theories, what made the most sense to me is to wait until summer, because I want to make sure my plants can bounce back right away and start growing again. But in practice of doing that for several years, I found that my plants are growing faster and faster and faster, and they get towards summer and they're growing amazingly well. And then I hit them with that repot and it slows them down, and then they start back up again, gaining momentum, and then winter comes and the growing season ends, and they never get back to that full speed that they had before I repotted them. So definitely doing it in summer, I'm not worried about delivering a fatal blow to any of the plants. But I have noticed in my experience, because I am doing this full repot, that slows them down and they don't really have enough time left in the year to get back to that full speed ahead growth that I was having before. So this year, I'm repotting everything as soon as I start seeing growth. So it's April 1st today. This thing's spitting out new leaves. A lot of my plants have been growing for the last several weeks or more. So I'm sure that this is gonna handle it no problem at all. And then it's gonna have 4, 5, 6, 7 or more months of uninterrupted growth. And to me, that makes the most sense. And so that is definitely what I would recommend to everybody. I did also repot some plants early in this year, halfway through February, beginning of March, before they had started growing, because I wanted to see how that style of timing would work. And I definitely noticed that those plants looked really sad and grumpy for several weeks or longer. So for sure, I would say that it seems like repotting at that time of year a little early definitely seems to slow the plants down way longer than if you waited a little bit. Now, of course, this depends, it's going to be different on where you live, because here in California, winter pretty much ends on February 1st and it gets warm and things start growing again. So that's why I started repotting like mid-February this year with certain plants. Wherever you live, if you live further north, you know, it could be mid or late April before it would even make sense to start repotting things. So use the growth of your plants as a guide. Once your indoor plants are growing, you know they've got enough energy, because if they didn't have extra energy, they would just be saving it. They're not going to be putting out any growth at all. So when you see that, it's safe to repot, so go ahead and give them a nice, lovely new home for the next growing season. Now, one other thing that you should keep in mind is that there are times when repotting a really sickly, struggling plant can save its life, especially if it's not getting enough light and the mixture is staying wet for like a whole month at a time or more. But there's also a lot of times where a plant is struggling, and so you repot it and it just stresses it out and dies. And it'll be probably a slow death for like a month or two. So yeah, it's rough to watch that kind of thing for any length of time. So really make sure you're paying attention to your plant and wait until you're confident it's going to survive. Because we don't just want our plants to survive the repot, we want them to be stoked that they got repotted so that they can just take off and start pushing out those leaves like crazy. That's what everyone wants. So you just gotta time it right, and you're gonna need to listen to your plants and pay attention to them to do that. Okay, so this thing's currently in a mix of 5 parts bark, 1 part turface, 1 part perlite, so it's 100% chunky. I was experimenting with this mix because you can water it and add fertilizer all the time, so you could potentially get really great growth, but you also need to water and fertilize all the time, and I'm moving away from that style of soil because I just have a lot of plants and I don't want to get rid of any, so I'm using wetter soils now. So the mixture we're going with today is 2 parts Miracle-Gro, then 2 parts bark, and then 1 part turface and 1 part diatomaceous earth. So it's actually going to be nice and chunky, but it's also going to stay pretty wet. So I think that's going to be perfect for any indoor plant really, but especially I think this ficus is going to love it. All right, so let's get this thing out of here, shall we? Okay, so no matter what I find in here, this thing is going back in this same pot, because this 3-gallon pot fits perfectly in this cache pot that it's sitting in, and there's no other option at this point. So it's just gonna have to fit. So let's see what these roots look like. Now I'm hoping, because this is 100% chunky soil, that it will come off of the roots quite easily. Woo! All right, I'll give you a close-up of this. So the roots are all nice and fuzzy. So that's because I've been adding mycorrhiza, myco powder. So there's beneficial fungus growing on there. Okay, so if you were wondering what I was talking about earlier about roughing up the, loosening up the root ball, it's just like this. Go ahead and get in there, loosen it up, do it on the bottom. Okay, so I'm gonna get more of this soil off than that, but at the very minimum, just do that. Even though, yes, you're damaging the roots a little bit, the plant is going to grow out into that new potting medium much, much more readily if you loosen up the roots. Dun, dun, dun. Well, there's some great news. This will easily fit back in this pot. Hallelujah. Okay, well, there we have it. The birthday bambino is safely in its new home. So hopefully it recovers in a week or 2 and then continues just moving forward for the year. And I probably won't repot it next year, so it's gonna get to have a lot of uninterrupted growth in this pot. So I hope this helps you choose when to repot your plants or not. Oh, one thing I want to add, if you're planning to do any root pruning, which is very stressful for a plant, absolutely wait until summer to do that. You do not want to do that at the start of spring or whenever, or any other time during the year. You want to make sure your plant is bursting with energy before you attempt something like that. Loosening that root ball up is going to prune some of those roots already. So good luck to you and your plants. Happy growing. I hope the amount of growth you get this year vastly exceeds your expectations, and I hope to see more of you in the next video. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a good one. Peace. All right, watering time, my boy. Watering time, my dude.